I have two questions. How do you actually you claim that your model is causal. Can you explain what's causal about it?
Yeah, so you can argue about that if you like. So to me, causal means the difference between a causal model and a non-causal model is a set of assumptions. Okay, so
no, I mean the definition of causal, right, is that a prior condition will actually be the cause of something in the future, right?
Yeah, so you're hoping that. Okay, I'm not going to get into an argument about what's causal and what's not, but within the realm of causal inference, you're estimating conditional differences, which are things like what is the prediction of your outcome if you had the treatment versus if you didn't have the treatment? Or what would the outcome be under every possible treatment for this person? So here, to construct that, we would have had to make a prediction for what would have happened to the person if we released them on condition, even if they were in reality released on personal recognizance.
But you understand that by saying it's causal, you give the impression that people can actually, it's the cause of something, right? So your models can be misinterpreted. But by making them interpretable, you can actually force people to make, like, for example, if gender, like, is there, right? People can say, oh, you commit crimes because you're a female.
Okay, it is true that models can be misinterpreted. That is very true. And we've had this problem in machine learning forever since the field started. That's why we even try to go to conditional differences. And that's better than just doing, here's what people like to do. So for instance, this ADHD stuff, people like to say, well, if I just stop putting things off until the last minute, does that mean my prediction changes? Does that mean I'm actually not ADHD? And it's like, no, you can't say that because the model's not causal, right? People want to mess with the coefficients and they want to think it's causal, but you can't.
But you said causal,
so
I'm sorry.
Whether or not it's causal is tricky business, and it involves assumptions and.
Sure, then you shouldn't say it then, right? Anyway.
Well, look, I'm not saying it for this model, right? So I'm saying that we're at least estimating conditional differences, right? You're actually doing counterfactual inference here, and I put causal in quotes because you need that set of assumptions in order for it to be causal. So I'm not really interested in arguing with you about this, but the fact is that if you have the assumptions and you're doing that extra layer of work, which is estimating the counterfactuals, then it's that's much better than what we had before, which was simply predictive models that are
the rabbit hole of causality also seems like scintillating reception material to me.
Absolutely, yes. Definitely.
So first of all, I wanted to say thank you. I think it's really important work and it's really beautiful work. I wanted to ask you though about the argument against Compass. It seems to me that the argument could actually really be strengthened quite a bit. The results that you showed where you did better on the ProPublica data, my understanding is that you also trained on the ProPublica data. You use cross-validation, as all self-respecting machine learning people do. But it does remain that if the ProPublica data were unrepresentative of the data that Compass either has or is forced to contend with, that these results might be misleading. So first of all, do you accept that as a concern? And what could we possibly do to have a fair bake-off where you could really compare?
What would be great is if all the data were public, or at least they would just use public data, because Northpoint is claiming that their data set, their proprietary data set, is representative of what we should do. Now, how can I verify that? I can't. At least people could duplicate what I did. So.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
But do you see the problem, though, that it's hard to compare your number to their number?
I think it's perfectly fair. I'm allowed to use a publicly available data set and do something that's completely reproducible. And they should be doing the same thing.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Am I up? Adrian Weller, Cambridge. First, thanks very much for a great talk. I really, again, support your work, Cynthia. But I do want to perhaps raise a few issues and broaden some of the questions we might consider when thinking about your suggestive question, which was, should we be putting North Point out of business? Because I think that there are important questions here for us to be thinking about as a community, and we don't want to be, I think we shouldn't be unnecessarily anti-business, and we shouldn't be perceived to be anti-business. There are legitimate reasons why a company might be making a product which the government or someone else wants to use for good reasons, and we should ask some questions along the following lines. So what should we require? And all of these, I think, are legitimate questions for reasonable debate. We shouldn't jump to a conclusion. So should the full algorithm and the full data set be publicly available? And there was a law passed in Bulgaria saying that that should happen. But clearly, if you do that, then it disincentivizes private companies to develop things. So it's, there are reasonable arguments both ways.
I think that depends on the problem that you're solving.
Yeah, fair. But I'm saying these are questions all of us should be discussing and debating.
Absolutely.
Some other issues are, do we need to have an explanation? So I'm very pro having explanations, but suppose you have a system which is just way more accurate without an explanation. Should we always reject that, or should we consider it? And an explanation that's understandable to whom? So here, presumably if it was understandable to the judge, maybe that's okay, or does it need to be understandable to the judged person? What if that person is not of typical mental capabilities? What should we do about that? And there are also other issues that people have discussed apart from just accuracy, like what if there are different false positive and false negative effects for certain subgroups? And presumably we all want those to be the same, but there's going to be some cost to accuracy. So I'm just pointing out there are a range of things to consider.
Yeah, you brought up a whole bunch of really good points, and I don't even know if I can remember all of them to answer them, but I can get some of them. So, I'm definitely not anti-business, of course, but I'm talking about a particular set of techniques we developed for criminology and medicine. So, interpretability means means something different in different domains. It doesn't actually have a honest to goodness single meaning. So, there may be many problems where you don't need interpretability, or interpretability means something completely different. In terms of fairness, I'm going to let Richard Burke and Michael Kearns actually discuss that, because they're going to talk about that shortly. But to me, that's a set of constraints. And if you have an optimization, if you have something that does optimization, you can actually put in a set of constraints if you want like a particular subgroup to be fair. Like that's also a problem I'm working on too. Like, can you find a subgroup for which this is unfair, and can you correct for that problem? Did I miss any? Probably.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Good job. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Karis Thompson. Thanks for a great talk. I'm a social scientist, so I'm going to just come from that side for a second, and specifically on the recidivism stuff. So from our perspective, we would say that a lot of the rules you end up with still have race and class built into them. So
yeah,
your likelihood
correlated with criminal history.
Yeah, and so and your likelihood of having a prior conviction and so on. Absolutely. So we would say, well, you haven't stepped away exactly from having those kinds of parameters. And in some ways, you might say, well, at least if you use the other things where people are explicitly using them because they're correlated to race and class, you're explicitly saying we need to address historic discrimination and its infrastructural ramifications across every aspect of life. So we would worry about taking that step. And then also from our point of view, the other concern is it's the interventions that we really care about. So we might look at something like this and say, oh, that's fantastic because we know who to focus on more now. But now we really need to complexify the model. We really need to know how all these different conditions of things we might do prior to conviction, post-conviction, have an effect in society as a whole, bringing down inequality, improving the economy, educational interventions, how they affect the recidivism rates for individual groups. So how do you build all those kinds of things back in, or have I just missed the point?
Well, in terms of the fairness issue, I think we sort of discussed that, and then I'm also going to send it over to Richard Burke, who's giving a talk specifically on fairness, so that's fine. But you're going to trade off fairness for predictive accuracy if you use any coefficient, any features, pretty much. Well, most features. Even if you use gender, you're going to trade off, fairness for accuracy there. In terms of whether or not it's causal, that's the whole goal of this, right? You want to say this is the most effective treatment for this subpopulation, right? That's exactly what this is trying to do. And whether or not it's actually causal, as I said, depends on a whole set of assumptions. But you're at least trying to estimate you're trying to do counterfactual inference. You're trying to say, if I put this person on this treatment, this would be the best treatment for them. Things like that.
So I think these last two were running late, so I'm trying to keep it.
How do you see these systems being used? Should they be a fully autonomous decision, or should there be a human in the loop? And I ask because the public tends to like to have a human in the loop for decisions that are important to them and that could really impact their lives. And also because they can take into account just the context, were they having a bad day, the things that these algorithms can't necessarily take into account. So how do you want them to be used?
Right now they're just supposed to help a human decision maker. Mm-hmm. But the problem with human decision makers is that they can be very biased and inaccurate. So you got the two of them working together, and you don't know whether it's better to use just the algorithm, just the human, or some combination. So we also have these for medicine, and you've got the doctor who's going to make their own judgment based on information that's outside of anything that's in the database, and you can't include that in the predictive model. So you need to have the human providing that extra information. For something like credit scoring, though, it's not clear whether you need to have a human in the loop. Because if you have a pretty decent credit history, you could potentially make a decision without a human.
Thanks, Cynthia. Just a really quick observation, because I wanted to weigh in on the debate that we've been having in relation to your paper, and fantastic work, because I'm a lawyer. I'm not a computer scientist. So I absolutely agree with you that the question of interpretability is very much a product of the question that you are asking. And if the consequences of applying your decision model are to deprive somebody of their liberty, then interpretability is absolutely vital if you believe that people have a right not to be arbitrarily denied of their liberty. And so I really support the work that you're doing.
Thank you for saying that. Nice, in a very, very nice way.
Thanks, Cynthia, again, and then we have a break.